I welcome all of you here with my full heart to attend this SRK Sustainability Conclave 23 2023. अब जो अजय जी ने बात बोला है उसमें आई लाइक टू ऐड समथिंग. आई जस्ट रेड यस्टरडे कि हमारे घर पे जो मिल्क के सैचेस आते हैं, जो मिल्क का पैकेट आता है, वी यूजुअली कट द कॉर्नर एंड थ्रो इट अवे. So only in Bengaluru, if we don't cut the edges and just like cut it, और वो कोना हम काट के नहीं फेंके, only in Bengaluru we can save 50 lakh small pieces of plastic. और small pieces of plastic को recycle करना is very tough. So these are the baby steps that Ajay sir was talking about that we can implement in our life for a more greener world tomorrow. Moving ahead, when it comes to sustainability, I take it very serious, like very seriously, and especially when it comes to wastage. And that's the reason that I take the food wastage very seriously, and that has had a very charming side effect that you can see the few extra pounds and inches has made their home on my waistline. Jokes aside, I wholeheartedly welcome each one of you present here for this remarkable event. Now, let's see the interesting and very fascinating process of how can we get started or how can we start for setting the net zero targets. How can we have an effective plan? How can we move towards implementation and achievement? And who better to guide us than Ms. Kamillakristensen, a renowned expert in urbanization and a counselor at the delegation of the European Union to India. To get a deeper understanding of Ms. Kamilla, I'd like to play a short introduction video of her.
Mrs. Kamillakristensen Rai has spearheaded groundbreaking bilateral cooperation on energy between India and Denmark, driving sustainable development and innovation. A distinguished member of the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, in India, she is recognized for her expertise in energy efficiency, notably for her contributions to bilateral cooperation on energy efficiency in buildings with China. She has championed climate projects in the Czech Republic and Bulgaria, forging successful partnerships with private stakeholders to combat climate change and promote sustainable practices. Please welcome Mrs. Kamilla Rai, Councillor at the delegation of the European Union to India.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this kind introduction video. Thank you, of course, for the invitation. Thank you to Sir of SRK, His Highness of Udaipur, and all esteemed speakers, and of course, participants. So I will speak to you about the EU. I will speak to you about urbanization, and I've also been asked to speak about targets, implementation, how to get started, and how to reach the achievements. So basically, I've been asked to speak about 4 parts here. How to get started, put in place an effective plan, move into implementation, and reach achievements. But first, I would like to share with you about the EU, the European Union. The European Union aims to be climate neutral by 2050. So, to have an economy with net zero greenhouse gas emissions. This objective is a central part of the EU Green Deal. The EU Green Deal is the policy, strategy for the European Union. And it's also a response to the commitment of the Paris Agreement. The EU has an immediate target that by 2030 to reach at least a 55% reduction in greenhouse gases. This also brings me to cities. Urbanization is what I work with, sustainable urbanization. since 2017 here in India. And cities plays an important role. 7 out of 10 people are expected to live in cities. And today, cities are responsible for 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So, sustainable urbanization, cities plays a very important role when we talk about climate change, sustainability, greenhouse gas emissions reduction. Secondly, about the EU. The EU and Government of India has a strategic partnership. It is a long-term and strong partnership at the highest level, Prime Minister level, between the Government of India and the EU. And within this strategic partnership, we work on different sectors. One of them is the partnership on smart and sustainable urbanization. This is with Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. The partnership on smart and sustainable urbanization was agreed at the EU-India Summit in 2017. And the EU and India have a shared vision on a smart and sustainable urbanization for the benefits of all citizens and for the world. So what do we do on smart and sustainable urbanization? We work on the planning part, on the urban resilience, on investments in smart and sustainable urbanization, in city climate action, which I will come back to today, business solutions in sustainable urbanization. I work on water, urban water sector, housing, sustainable urban mobility. All these sectors are important when we talk about net zero, when we talk about climate action, because they have a contribution through the greenhouse gases. And also I'd like to mention the promotion of the implementation. It is through what we call the EU Global Gateway. The EU Global Gateway is the template for the EU to build resilient connections with people and with the world. And now, of course, as we are in Surat today, I'd like to share with you our work, because Surat Municipal Corporation and the city of Rotterdam in the Netherlands have a long-term city-to-city cooperation, and this is one of the ways we are working, bringing together cities in India and in Europe to learn from each other, to work in a partnership. So now I will speak about the four points. So basically, how to get started. First of all, I'd like to say that when we talk about climate action, and in this respect, city climate action, it is multidisciplinary. It is a holistic approach. It was also mentioned today by an earlier speaker. It means to work together, to work across departments, across agencies. So it is holistic. We have to take a holistic approach to it. It also reflects togetherness. We need to work together in order to work on the net zero, in order to work on the climate action. So working together means in the preparation, in the monitoring, and in the implementation. And it also requires a vision which will show us in the right direction. So it has different ingredients when we say how to get started. And another point I'd like to say about how to get started is to build on and remember all the good work which is already taking place. Like, for example, yesterday I visited the factory of SRK, and I could see the certification of LEED in the platinum. So build on what is all the good work which is already taking place. I think that is one ingredient also to how to get started. recently we had our EU-India Urban Forum in New Delhi. We organized together with Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. And here we focused on excellent solutions. And we saw the excellent solutions which cities are working on across India and also at the national level, of course, and from cities in the EU. So to work on, to build on what is already going on. And one of the examples here is like solid waste management, because solid waste management is one of the components when we have to look at climate action. Because you have a greenhouse gas emission, potential greenhouse gas emission from the landfill of the methane. But solid waste is a topic we have worked on in many, many years. So build on what is already been going on. But also look at it in a new context. Look at it in a new context, and this is where we come back to the holistic approach. Look at it as, we need to look at this as a cross-cutting and not so much in, you can say, verticals. And another 2 points about how to get started is the definitions. Like we talk about sustainability, and sometimes once we start discussing words like this, there may be different understandings of sustainability. And I just want to give an example, because when we talk about smart cities mission, smart cities program, the understanding of what is a smart city can be very different. So I think to get started is somehow, one thing is to synchronize definitions. So what do we mean by sustainability? There can be different understandings of it. And if we want to reach a goal, it's good to have a kind of a somehow similar starting point. And the last point I want to mention here is that under the G20, there's the Urban 20 group. And here I'm also involved in the work of the National Institute of Urban Affairs. And the work is on environmental responsible behavior. So again, an element into it is the behavior. So this was a few points about, you can say, how to get started. So next point, so to put in place an effective plan. And a couple of points I would like to mention here. Put in place an effective plan. One of the items here is that from my view here, it needs to be an impact-based plan. And we're also trying to work on impact-based urbanization. I'll come back to this. Second point is about the data. There will be needed some kind of data. There will be needed data from energy, from transport, from buildings, from solid waste. All this needs to be there in order to to make up the plan, to monitor the plan, to report on the plan, and so on. So about the impact-based approach, so it basically means a little bit comparison to being more activity-based, but because the activity-based will lock us in, we will kind of think that we have to do all these activities, and we may forget the overall impact we want to reach. So that's why I'm talking about put the plan in place which is impact-based. Impact-based, it will have a little longer term kind of a goal, what we want to achieve, and then it is relatively dynamic how we are going to get there. This will, because on the other hand, if you work on the activity-based starting point, you will just say, I have to do 10 this and that, 10 workshops, 10 so and so, and then probably I reach my goal. But it may not be that, because it's not really that easy to plan in ahead, and everything is dynamic. So that is one point. About the data, I mean, this is a work which I think has two dimensions. One dimension is that for one actual plan, let's say a plan to move to net zero for a company, for a city. That's one job, to get the data, to understand whether the data has of high quality, and so on. But from my work in urbanization, water sector, I also work on air pollution. I mean, actually, there's some similarities here on the data, because it's not really always easy to find or get. So on the broader scope, I think a really important contribution could be on a more generic kind of a tool or guideline on data. It will be very much helpful for this work and also in the broader context. And another side of the data is the indicators. So how are we going to, we have the plan, we want to put it in place, but we need some kind of indicators. So we could use some from the Sustainable Development Goals, because they are already in place. There's already indicators in place. So, and this is a kind of a common language. So it's understood by many different parties, global level, national level. So that could be one way to look at the indicators. Another way to look at the indicators for the plan here is from Government of India. You have the Climate Smart City Assessment Framework. So even that is, you can say it is working towards cities. I'm sure it can be used in other contexts as well, if you wish to make the plan for company or otherwise. So it is some places to go for the inspiration of the data set and the indicators. Yeah, and I talked about the quality of the data. And why is this data important? It's also important to get in order to take, you can say, informed decisions. So we want to do this and that solution to go to net zero, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We want to put in a solution, let's say electrical vehicles or something. But we need to understand what impact does it have? How can we actually measure the impact? So that's also why and of course there's a cost to the solutions. So again, the data set is really important, and I really think that in the broader context, from a conclave like this, that could be a very, very beneficial contribution in a generic term to work on the data for this kind of plans. And as I said, working on the excellent solutions which is already taking place. Yeah. And when I say excellent solutions and how to put the plan in place, is that there may be excellent solutions on urban mobility, on transport, otherwise, in a city, in one context, but it needs, if you find this useful, it needs to be translated into the next context. So we cannot just pick up something from one city and put it in another city. We have to understand the interface. We have to transform it. That is whether it is within India, within Europe, from India to Europe the other way. It has to be transformed. It has to be related to the local context. Right. So now I will speak to you about the last point. So now we have the plan in place, we have got started, and now we want to move into implementation. So I want to give you one example, and that is in fact inspired because I did work with Udaipur Municipal Corporation almost 3 years together with the city from Denmark. And one of the work we did, or one of the work we looked at, was the wastewater and the wastewater treatment. Because in the context of climate change and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, the potential of producing energy from the wastewater is very interesting, and is also done some places, but basically have multiple benefits. So move into implementation. One way, or one example, look at the potential producing energy from the wastewater. It can have a benefit of actually having sufficient electricity to run the wastewater treatment plants itself and selling to the grid. Also, it will have an environmental positive benefit, because instead of, you can say, taking the sewage and collecting it and basically dumping it in the nature, it has a methane emission. So it has it's a multiple benefit, and it is a resource actually. The wastewater is a resource to produce energy. Yeah, so this is one example. I want to also give one example from our city-to-city cooperation, which is international urban and regional cooperation between city of Surat and city of Rotterdam, and the very good work here on what is the Surat Water Plaza. And it has multiple effects, because what it is basically a square. It is a sunken square, so it has the benefit of capturing the water if there's a lot of water. It also has a more religious way when you have the festival of the Ganesh, but it also has a social function as a square for meetings, sports, and so on. But it has been nominated, and it was shown in London for an exhibition for its excellence solutions and how to respond to the climate change. So this, of course, I want to mention, since we are, of course, here in Surat. So I talked about the local context. Generally, just in order to conclude here, I think the approach going forward and towards the achievements is to do two things, maybe a little bit at the same time. To remember what did we do a few years back. And what I mean here is that in India, you have the excellent solutions of the step wells. And you have the excellent solution, how you actually are building, constructing the housing, which does not necessarily then need the air conditioning. To kind of recall this way of working, but also going forward, instead of looking at the sectors individually, like the energy sector, solid waste, transport, building, and so on, more take the holistic approach, which I also spoke about in the beginning, because I think that is how we can find the new solutions. It is not solution just about automatically we are thinking of some solutions we know, but we actually innovate something new. And one example for this I want to mention is that my understanding is that in some of the, if you say buildings and the glass in the buildings, it also has solar panels inside the glass. So I think this kind of unique new ways of constructing the buildings, combining with the solar panels, I think this is where we somehow could move towards and find new solutions like this. So what I want to conclude here is that to start, to make the plan, to go into implementation, and to achieve that, first of all, to take the holistic approach, to focus on togetherness. We have to be together, we have to work together on this, to build on excellent solutions already in place, but also take it into the new context, translate into local context, and work on it as an impact-based approach rather than activity. And then we need to unlock, find the new solutions. Maybe forget some of the solutions we know, but find the new ones. And the last one I want to mention again here is the data. if we can somehow work on the data in a generic term, this will be a benefit for the, you can say, the business approach or the city approach, but also in a much larger approach in order to achieve the net zero. So thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you.